This is Wisdom Anime Recap. This means war. The nebulous sky dyed in grays and whites held promise of snowfall, marking the beginning of a catastrophic end with incalculable scope. An inevitable battle brewed upon the snowy trenches of the Eastern Front. Smoke and frost flooded the soldiers' lungs, seeming to freeze over time amidst the fleeting calm before the tempest. A lone commander rose to initiate the charge forward when a blinding veil of snow erupted from the ground below, summoning forth a black knight clad in the vestments of a medieval crusader. Astride his accursed crimson-eyed steed, the figure careened forward with only one end, to sever the lone commander's head from his shoulders. This was the beginning of the Nazis' invasion of Moscow during the Second World War, albeit in an alternate world where they had learned to harness the powers of the underworld. Nadia awoke in the back of a car, where the other passengers watched her with suspicion. They drove upon an icy road toward a military camp to perform for the Russian soldiers. A corpulent woman was first on stage, who sang traditional Russian polka to their delight and applause. Then, the presenter brought out Nadia blindfolded and introduced her as a psychic who could answer any question. Among the skeptical soldiers, one raised his hand and asked her to guess his name as a test of her alleged powers. To their astonishment, she was able to guess without hesitation. The soldiers rose and clamored with questions, all determined to discover what truths lay in the recesses of this young girl's mind. Nadia selected a soldier from amongst the crowd, one who'd asked when he would finally meet his demise. She removed her blindfold to look him in the eye, but what faced her was a horror, one for which she could never have prepared herself. All the soldiers were mortally wounded. Gunshots and dripping blood, bones broken beyond repair, surrounded her on all sides. As the presenter prepared himself to end the act, Nadia heard the sound of helicopter propellers and jet planes passing above. The Nazis had summarily located them. They let down missiles from their aircrafts, so Nadia tried to flee for cover, yet her legs could only carry her so fast. An explosion robbed her of her consciousness and sent her flying into the snow. She was transported back to a realm somewhere between space and time, her unconscious, which manifested itself as a theater. The projection on screen flashed moments from her memory, her childhood home, her beloved parents and their days in the circus, as well as a boy she had once loved. She remembered her friends, with whom she had traveled all throughout her motherland for pleasure when she wasn't training with them as a Russian operative. She had attended an elite camp where they honed her clairvoyance through academics in tandem with blindfolded hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, and obstacle courses, all the while administering a heavy dose of brainwashing to ensure her loyalty to the Soviet Union. Still, she remembered her time there fondly, as she had spent it surrounded by her comrades. Her training had only ended when the Nazis bombed and raided the facility, forcing her to flee. She had escaped with the boy she loved, but he insisted on returning for their friends. All but Nadia met their demise that day, leaving her to face war without them by her side. She was finally ready to join them as her body lay buried within the snow. Yet a part of her still yearned to live. It urged her to wake up and fight, but this part of her was weak, so Nadia remained prone on the ground at the mouth of Destiny's door. Nevertheless, she awoke in a wooden cabin illuminated by candlelight, where she faced a portrait of the Madonna holding the infant Messiah. An aged prophet sat on the table across the room, poring over sacred texts that whispered promises of the resurrection of an ancient evil, the second coming of a medieval German crusader by the name of Baron Gwyde von Wolf. He'd led the Teutonic Order's invasion of Russia in the 13th century, brutalizing its people and burning its cities. Many believed him to wield the power of demons, earning him the nickname of the Angel of Death. In the end, the Russian people stood to face him in the historic battle on the ice when they had finally felled him and his troops, leaving them to sink, now liberated from their mortal coil. Yet according to prophecy, von Wolf was fated to return 700 years later, in time to torment Russia once more, now with the Nazis by their side. Nadia recalled her visions of his second coming, yet she misconstrued them as dreams. She had incurred a concussion during the explosion at the military camp, which had left her with retrograde amnesia. The prophet explained he would take her to the Kremlin, where a man by the name of General Below would explain everything to her. He mounted Nadia atop a horse the next morning, which would carry her away to Moscow to meet with General Below. The prophet stayed behind to fend off two twin German spies tasked with eliminating Nadia, yet they proved too much for him. The spies' attempt culminated with his downfall, as well as injury to Nadia's horse. She was able to ride upon its back through the day and into the night, yet the beast eventually succumbed, leaving her to trek on foot for the remainder of the trip well into the following morning when she collapsed at the gates of the Kremlin. She awoke at a hospital that night, where the doctor explained she'd been in a coma. He insisted General Below was a product of her imagination, which had been exacerbated by the concussion she incurred at the military camp, but she wouldn't believe him. She struggled to stand to continue her journey, so the nurses sedated her. She lay on her hospital bed until later that night when a group of figures clad in military uniform woke her up. The man in charge introduced himself as General Below and brought her to his car, which would finally take them to the Kremlin. He reminded her that he was the head of Section 6, the Soviet Army's occult intelligence branch, established in response to the German Ahnenerbe, who'd be the ones to summon Baron von Wolf from the grave. Nadia was Section 6's top agent, but she'd disappeared a week prior during an undercover mission as a propagandist with a traveling entertainment troupe. When they arrived at the hidden base of Section 6, he introduced her to the equipment they used to monitor the underworld. It was clear to them that von Wolf's fated resurrection was mere hours away. He brought her to the lowest floor of the building where they kept a contraption that could temporarily transport her soul into the underworld, aided by her clairvoyance. The engineers buckled her in and administered a cocktail of hallucinogens to transport her into her unconscious, which served as a gateway to the underworld. Nadia found herself in a Ferris wheel at a degraded amusement park on the other side. The world around her appeared flooded with purple haze and populated by motley architecture, and when she called out, she received no answer but the cawing of red-eyed crows, likely bad omens incarnate. Her wandering led her to some inauspicious woods, which she entered without hesitation, leading to her making her first contact with the cursed creatures she knew were bound to lurk there in the underworld. Two skeletal figures on horseback wielding medieval weaponry and clad in crusader armor assaulted her on either side, ultimately tying her up with rope and chain. One tied her on the back of his horse as they advanced through the wasteland, witnessing the damned souls of historical warriors, World War I and American Civil War soldiers, forgotten knights and samurai, struggling on the ground below as though trapped in eternal battle as punishment for their transgressions in life. They arrived at a ruined castle of stone upon a slope where Baron Gwyde von Wolf himself delivered a speech for his troops in preparation for their return to the world of the living. He took no interest in Nadia, yet he recognized her as not being among the dead, so he sent for her to be delivered to his torturer and executioner before turning to begin his journey to the battlefield. The executioner recited scripture as he prepared his instruments for Nadia, all the while maintaining a sadistic smile in preparation for the ordeal he hoped to put her through. Then the ground began to shake and rumble as though the walls were to fall. A vehicle came crashing through the door, driven by Nadia's late comrades from Section 6. They drove her off the castle, scarcely making it past the closing drawbridge to higher ground. Her friends agreed to aid her in battle, in spite of the fact that travel to the world of the living was considered taboo for dead spirits. They took her back to the amusement park to meet with General Below. Nadia would summon them when it came time for battle with the undead spirits of von Wolf and his troops. She traveled back into the realm of her unconscious that transported her soul into her mind, where General Below confided she was the first to return to the world of the living with her life. The prophet who'd nursed her back to health after the explosion at the military camp faced her at the Section 6 offices with his book of legends still in hand, which had protected him from the German spy's bullet. As a group, they deduced that von Wolf would likely attack at Lake Seliger, where both the Nazi and Soviet troops faced one another in the trenches in preparation for an imminent full-scale battle. Nadia's powers would allow her to sense when the moment drew near. Ideally, they would try to protect the lone commander, as he was the focus of her visions, but she could not recall his identity. General Below sent her out to rest, hoping that sleep might jog her memory, completely unaware of the disaster that awaited her the next morning. On her way back to the Section 6 base, her driver met with gunfire at a stoplight. The twin German spies had found Nadia once more, still determined to finish the job. They chased her through the icy streets, losing her at the train station. Nadia caught sight of a newspaper in a fellow passenger's hand reporting on the lone survivor of an air raid at a military base a week prior by the name of Alexander Nemov. She'd faced him both at the air raid and in her visions. Nadia departed at the next stop to call General Below on a payphone, who tracked Nemov to a nearby railway station. Unfortunately, the spies managed to corner her once more before she could confront the lone commander, so she leapt onto a departing train's roof. She was able to shake them off at the railroad switch by leaping onto Nemov's train at the moment of separation. She rested in the back car until the train reached its destination that night, yet she lost track of him once more in the crowd of soldiers. She bided her time amidst the missiles and bullets in the trenches the next day, hoping to catch sight of Nemov before her instincts signaled the beginning of von Wolf's rise from the underworld. She summoned Section 6 to join her in battle, sending them through the carnival of her unconscious, this time manifested as towering dolls and effigies of her buried memories. Time dilated around Nadia as the boundary between the trenches and the underworld shattered, giving way for von Wolf and his undead troops' ascension through the ice and Section 6's plummet from the sky above. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Section 6, in spite of being outnumbered, carved a path through the malevolent Crusader forces, keeping a vigilant eye on Commander Nemov all the while. Nadia clashed swords with von Wolf, only to stumble into the trenches. Her heart pounded as she scrambled to regain her footing, but it was too late. Von Wolf loomed over her, his blade poised to strike. The world around her appeared to slow as Nadia braced for the inevitable, until a gunshot pierced the air. A comrade's shot rang true, piercing von Wolf's chest. Sensing their leader's vulnerability, the undead horde initiated their retreat, vanishing back into their sinister depths. Once time returned to normal and the soldiers' clash gave way, the Soviets emerged victorious in the end. The blizzard that had veiled the battlefield also relented, unveiling the stark, wintry expanse below. Nadia approached von Wolf's fallen form and removed his helmet, revealing him to be a faker, just as Section 6 dissolved into the ether, leaving behind nothing but the promise of a greater battle to come.